So the relatively big AI news this morning is Claude and America asking them to turn off the new model for the rest of the world.
Yeah, that happened to me over the weekend. Fable 5. I haven't had a chance to get into it. It was a bit annoying, having spent my money getting my Claude account.
Yeah,
it's been outlawed as terrorists overseas not allowed to.
Well, in testing it, all I found was actually where the models have got better and better. I'm almost better off. My first question now is, what should I be using for this task?
Yeah.
And then I'll use the one that keeps me within my limit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get some very fancy AI, but you can only use it for a few hours a day, especially with Claude.
With Claude, in fact, Google's going the same way. They're starting to rate limit as well.
Yeah.
I think we've gone from that tipping point that we are now short of compute until Mr. Musk gets all his satellites up into space sorted. That's going to be a restriction over the coming weeks and months, not having enough compute power.
And then the other challenge I saw off the back of that, as more and more people use it, but it's restricted, the cost of using it or the demand for it increases the cost. And then there's a tipping point where potentially it ends up being more expensive than a person. So it's so changeable.
And for a lot of these, in fact, the models from 3 months ago are more than adequate for what most of us need. And they're now a lot cheaper. It's a bit like getting, I suppose, a second generation iPhone rather than a first generation.
Yeah.
Right, we're at 2 past. Michael, do you want to do some introductions?
I'd love to do some introductions. I don't think I've worked with Charlotte and Connor. They're not from clients that I've known, but I work as one of the virtual IT directors at Netitude. I head up the team now, and we do IT support for small and medium businesses with a real focus on how to use IT for improving the business. Mike is someone that we've been working with recently and has delighted some of our clients with his AI introductions and helping their board and management understand how it's changing the world and how to adapt. And he's our go-to for when we need to go in a little bit more depth on AI. Do you want to do any introduction?
I can quickly. So I used to work for a little outfit called KPMG, the accounting business firm who you've probably come across. And I've trained something like 50,000 people in my career there. And 3 years ago, I started globally working with our AI team on training. So when I semi-retired 2 years ago, I now run my own AI training business, and it is exploding like nothing at the moment. So that's one of the reasons for doing a little taster this morning. Michael, a bit more about your AI readiness.
Yeah, so why are we talking to clients about it right now? As we were discussing just before the call, what AI can do and what's available is evolving really, really rapidly. If you dabbled a year ago and you thought it wasn't for you, if you try today, you will almost be blown away at the ability. The things that weren't there a year ago exist now. So you can ask for a document generation, you can ask for a slide deck, and then you can watch it go off and QA quality, check that what is produced actually matches, and then go back and fix it. So it is a whole another level forwards. Everybody's talking about it, and we're trying to open people's eyes and make sure that they're getting started at the right time, if they're not started already. It fits into the overall picture of how we work with clients, which is we think that when you're trying to get to digital transformation as a business, try and take advantage of AI, of the latest software, reporting, business intelligence, all the good stuff that makes the biggest difference, you've got to get the fundamentals right first. If you don't have a solid cybersecurity, you're going to be tripping over yourself with distractions, with breaches, not able to meet your client's contractual requirements. You've got to take care of that first. We then help people look at technology standardization, so systems that are supported, that can be connected together, best in class, designed for today. We think those pieces start to work together, and you'll see that staff feel the benefit of IT, that it isn't something that's dragging them down, that they feel like they're well equipped to deal with it. Using Teams properly, chatting, being able to work remotely, all of these things come together. When you have these steps in place, when you do come around to do digital transformation, you're ready to really lift off and take advantage of it. You're not tripping over yourself. You're not trying to use AI, but you've got a computer from 6 years ago that is struggling to open a few browser tabs, for example. So that's the overall picture of what we help with. AI is using things like AI successfully is the end goal, and that's what I'd like Mike to run us through today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Just to quickly say, we've got another session at 1 o'clock where I'm going to do kind of an intermediate AI. This is kind of the intro basics. You're very welcome to join us for that. At the end, I'll happily stay on for another 5, 10, however many minutes if you want, answering questions. If you want me to do some live demos of some of the tools I'm using, again, very open to that. If you need to rush off for other meetings, I will take no offence at that point. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Is it going to steal my job? Is the question everybody asks me. Well, I don't think so much steal jobs as remove some of the tasks. Now, I bet you there are tasks you do every week you hate doing, the grunge, the boring, the repetitive tasks that probably add little value. And wouldn't it be nice if AI could do some or all of the rubbish parts of your job to free you up for the bits that you do enjoy doing, you're good at, and I bet add most value to your business? And actually, there's a second element here, not only having more time for the fun bits, but actually the AI can make you 3, 5, 10 times as effective as the bits you're good at. So if AI stealing your job means all the rubbish going, the fun stuff coming and getting better at that, well, I say bring on stealing jobs. Now, my youngest daughter, she leaves school today. It's my last ever school run after 25 years of 4 children at school. And she says, Daddy, now you're 62, does AI mean ancient intelligence? Actually, it's probably right. I actually call it augmented intelligence, because what it can do is it can take my latent abilities and augment me, make me even more effective. Now, I'm going to make use of a little online polling tool called Menti. It's one of these anonymous third-party tools. And you can either scan the QR code, or if you go to menti.com on your browser and put in that 8-digit code, don't worry, all this is anonymous, but just be interested as an honesty question, which of these sort of terms to do with AI have you sort of heard about, or you know what they are? Let me go quiet for a few seconds whilst you vote. And thanks for your honesty there. So a mixture, and that's very much what we get. The reason why I put these up, these are some of the kind of fundamental basic principles or tenets you need to know. Rather than you're learning to drive a car, you need to know what the steering wheel's for and what the brake and the accelerator pedals are for, why you don't press both at the same time. You don't have to understand how the braking system works or the fuel injection system, but you need to know the basic concept so you can drive the car, you can drive the AI safely. And I'm finding over the last years, many people never get taught these basic principles and tenets, and that's often why they're struggling with AI. Now, a lot of organizations, and I think, Michael, a lot of your clients will have an enterprise version of, say, Copilot, and often see a little kind of green shield appears in the kind of the top right-hand corner, which indicates you're in the kind of the approved company safe space. If you haven't got one of these, you probably need to call Michael and his team to check. As I say, you often find this up in the top right-hand corner of things like Copilot. You may find that your business, maybe Netitude or help, have put extra sort of safety features or guardrails in as well. Now, what you may not realize is that AI has been around actually for a long time. Yes, this ChatGPT stuff's quite new, but it goes back maybe to even Alan Turing in Bletchley Park in the Second War. If you've just used facial recognition to open your phone for the quiz, that's AI. Netflix, you may have asked, give me the next box set to listen to or to watch. Again, that's AI. But what's new for about 3.5 years is this sort of what's called generative AI. And this has been the big game changer, because all of us in just natural language, you can type in a question, can start to use it. Before that, and it's some kind of techie nerd who understood coding, you really couldn't make use of these tools. What you may not know actually is how these things work. In effect, all they are is very clever guessing machines. It's trying to predict the most likely next set of words in maybe a sentence or a phrase, answering a question or a challenge you've given it. So if I asked, what colour is the sky on a beautiful sunny day in Chew Magna? Well, most of the time it would say blue. But at dawn and dusk might be beautiful orange or purple. And if you come from Birmingham, it's grey and overcast and raining all the time. And this makes it very different from something like Google search, which will give you the same answer every time you ask it. With a generative model, each time you run it, you might get a subtly different thing than you did the last time. Was it trying to predict the most likely, not the absolute answer? Now, predictive texting isn't something new, and just think, have you ever been embarrassed when you've been doing texting and it's auto-corrected a word and it's put the wrong word in and then you've sent it and you've had to retract it? So this idea of predicting has been around for quite some time. Now, one myth I want to dispel, this is not Google search on steroids. This is a very different beastie, this language model thing. Rather like a horse and a motor car are both forms of human transport, but very different forms. And a big mistake is to try and use it as though it's a new version of Google search. Almost part that as a whole new way of interacting with these models. With Google, if I ask the same question 10 times, I get the same answer 10 times. Only if I change some of the input variables will the answer change. Not so with generative AI. And there's a clue in the title, generative. It generates something new every time. So if I ask it the same thing 10 times, I could get 10 similar or 10 very different responses. And that's because of something called stochastic. It's a fancy word for it embraces randomness. And that can be good and bad. I do a lot of work in innovation and creativity. I want the machine to come up with wild, wacky, left field answers. When I'm doing my VAT returns, though, I don't want to get creative with my numbers in the accounting. So let's look at some of these key concepts that almost nobody gets taught, but are vital in order to use the tool. So next quiz question is, any idea what a token is, a token in the world of AI? Okay, let me go quiet for a few seconds whilst you answer. Well done, Slytherin House. You get the house points this time. These models don't actually read the English the way you and I do. It actually breaks it into smaller subsections called a token. It's about 3 or 4 letters long. And these are important because the cost of using these language models are often based in tokens. So it might say, oh, it's $10 per million tokens you use. A little bit like in your motor car, you put maybe sort of 10 gallons of fuel in and you get so many miles per gallon. So similarly, you get kind of so many tokens, so much usage per dollar per pound that you're using. Another very important thing are guardrails, safety features. So all the models will have guardrails built in. So if you ask it, how do I make an atomic bomb? It will politely refuse. If you ask one of the Chinese models about Tiananmen Square, it will politely refuse. Ask an American model about Tiananmen Square, it'll give you a chapter and a verse about the history. So different models, different companies have different layers of guardrail. Have you ever wondered why they called it ChatGPT? Well, word on the street, it was it's designed to be chatted with, having a conversation with, the way you would with colleagues, with friends. Again, very different from Google search. You never have a conversation with Google. You ask a question, get the answer, move on. But rather like with humans, if you and I are having a chat about a problem, we'd probably go backwards and forwards a few times, try some different ideas, maybe go down a blind alley, maybe get another person involved. And maybe after the third, fourth iteration, we come up with the ideal answer. Now, I won't say perfect, because nothing's perfect, but the ideal answer. And these models are designed to be conversation, chatted backwards and forwards, and that's where you get to the ideal answers. And that's a very different way of working than we've done with Google search over the years. My next quiz question, any idea what an hallucination is? Hallucination in the world of AI. And if you've lost the QR code, I'll just put it back on the screen. Oh, very well played. I think Hufflepuff, you get house points this time. Now, this is where the answer comes, and it looks plausible, but it actually has been made up. Now, as the models have got better and better over the weeks and months, this problem's getting less and less, but it's not gone away completely, and maybe never will do. Because of this stochastic style, it's always doing the most likely next set of words. So I'd always advise, keep your critical eye open at all time, what you're sharing and what you're taking out of these models. Treat them rather like having some very bright summer graduate students at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard. Very bright, enthusiastic, want to please you, but you still need to have governance over them. You wouldn't blindly send them off to do some research without explaining what you wanted, maybe showing them some research papers from last year, maybe asking them some clarifying questions. And when they come back, you wouldn't again just blindly take what they gave you and send it to your boss or a top client. Again, you would review it, maybe ask them to refine certain bits, maybe again ask them some clarifying questions. Ultimately, we are accountable as humans for what we take out of these machines. And my former employers, KPMG, were in the news last week. They published a paper all about AI. And it turns out there were a load of AI hallucinations in the report that no human had bothered to read through and check before publishing. As you can imagine, the embarrassment levels are high. Another important thing to be aware of is bias. Now, these models are trained on huge amounts of information. Think the internet. And we all know there's great stuff on the internet and there's, let's be charitable, pretty rubbish stuff as well. And because it's trained on human stuff, our unconscious bias would have crept into that data. So again, keep your critical eye open for bias. Good example was an IT recruitment firm in London, and the first version of their bot was heavily skewed towards gentlemen rather than lady applicants. Why? Well, historically, 90% of applicants were gentlemen and not ladies. Now, they soon spotted the problem and sort of readjusted it. But again, keep your eye out for bias that'll be in the data. I have to make a small confession at this point. In 1977, yes, 1977, I went to the opening day of Star Wars Episode 4 in Leicester Square. I had no idea what we were going to see. But if you've ever seen a Star Wars movie, it always starts that kind of that scrolling text that goes up. It was an evil time in the Empire. And when about the fifth paragraph appears, the top paragraph disappears and you can't read it anymore. Well, there's a thing called context window. Think of it as kind of short-term working memory. So you're chatting backwards and forwards. There comes a point where some of the early part sort of falls out of the window. And I've had folks say, Mike, it's gone funny. It's forgetting things. It's because it's run out of sort of working memory. Now, rather like electric vehicles have a problem with how far they can go before you have to recharge them, they will sort out the electrical battery problem. They'll sort out the windows. Now, some of the early windows were only, and they're measured in tokens, 32,000. That's about 2 pages of A4. Some of the new models are now 2 million tokens. That's about 2 Harry Potter novels. So probably in the medium term to long term, this problem may go away for the most of us. But in the short term, if it's looking funny, just think, that strange guy was talking about Star Wars. Oh, yeah, the context window. A couple of use cases I use probably 4 times a day. One is summarizing emails. got long threaded discussion, lots of people involved, and I'm too lazy to go through it in detail. So I can ask it, can you summarize this, pull out key themes, identify any actions for me, and boom, there we go, a matter of seconds. Now, I still want to do a bit of due diligence and check up on it, but it's saving me a huge amount of time. Back end of that is meeting notes. I do a lot of online training courses, 2-3 hours, and I'll record them. Again, I haven't got the time to be going through as I used to in the past through the full transcript, pulling out key points, action items, maybe amendments for future courses. But now I can get the machine to do it for me. So pull out some key themes, any action points, any notable questions. And this is a great example of the grotty part of my job I'm outsourcing to the IT. So it does this in a matter of minutes, what it would have taken me hours. So I can focus on what I'm good at and add most value, redesigning training courses, updating existing ones, doing cheat sheets, etc. So it's given me back a lot more time to then concentrate on the valuable parts of the job. And boom, this is what it comes up with in a couple of minutes. Now, it all starts with this thing called a prompt. Again, just a quick quiz question. How experienced are you with prompting? And an answer of 0 is very much acceptable. This is our introductory course. Actually, that's quite advanced. Usually I have a lot more people down on the left-hand side. But that's fabulous to hear. You might benefit from coming on our intermediate course at lunchtime. In effect, all a prompt is, it's the input that you provide, often in the form of, say, a question, a sentence, maybe a goal or objective. And that will then guide the model for its output. And there is a whole range of different sort of prompting styles and techniques, from very simple to much more complicated. So if I say a school teacher, I might start with simple, what is photosynthesis? Then I might want to expand that. What are the key steps? Was it carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, water? Can you imagine the flow? I might then want to amplify that. Why is it so vital to the Earth's ecosystem? Well, without it, the planet would die within about a week of carbon dioxide poisoning. As I mentioned, there are a whole raft of techniques, and rather like learning a foreign language, you might start with a language with a few words and a bit of vocab and get good at that, and then add a few more words. Similarly, start with a few techniques and get used to them, and then add a few more, and then add a few more. And you'll find your sort of natural vibe, ones that work well for you. Now, there's a technique that's optional, but very valuable, called personas. And this is where you say to the model, can you act in the style of a project manager, a teacher, an IT director? In fact, you can actually ask it to play 4 or 5 different characters at the same time, in effect giving sort of different views on a problem you've got. Top tip, don't just say something like project manager, give it a bit more flesh. The reason, I mentioned earlier that the models are trained on the internet, which have got good stuff and bad stuff. Now, I've been doing projects for 40 years, and there's lots of people out there who claim to be a project manager who really aren't. So I would say project manager of, say, 30 years experience in the, say, manufacturing sector with professional qualifications, Prince 2 and PMI. So when it's looking for people that fit that criteria, more likely to find genuine project managers and give me a better quality output as a result. Another thing you never get taught, when did it leave school? Now, the models are trained for months and months, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then released, or in Anthropic's case, not released, for us to use. But the teams behind them don't tend to keep the data up to date. So by the week, the data ages. Now, in many cases, that might not matter. If I'm doing some project research, there's enough stuff from the last 40 years. But if I was looking at the last, say, 6 weeks of the stock market, it wouldn't know, unless it's got a live link to the internet. And you can ask it, what was your cutoff date? It could be 18 months ago. People say, oh, Mike, it's stupid. It doesn't know last week's stock market numbers. No, it won't in its training data. It will if it has a live link to the internet. So just beware, that might be some of the reasons why the quality of the data looks a bit odd. Is it an art? Is it a science? It's probably somewhere between the two. There are some good practices. You won't be surprised to hear that the clearer you are with your goal, the better the output. A bit like, imagine those summer students. If I give them a rather vague task, I'll probably get a rather vague response. So the clearer I can be, the better the quality. Give it the right context, background information, any examples. Limits. You might just say the last 6 weeks of stock market figures. You can also decide on the tone, the output. Do you want a blog post, an email, a 9-page report? Do you want it in the style of William Shakespeare? Have a go at that one, it's a lot of fun. And then the final one, which again is very different from Google, is this reiteration and testing. I'm going to share, because you're special people, the 3 ways of prompting. Most people just do the middle step. The first step of great prompting is planning and preparation. Who would have thought planning would be important in business life? Most people want to go straight into number 2, prompt. And the bit they never do, where the magic happens, is the third step of fine-tune, reiterate, polish, that going backwards and forwards. So again, rather like with my summer student, if I'm properly prepared for my meeting with them, so I know what I want to do, I've got some examples, I take questions, I ask them questions, they're going to give me a better quality product. And then when they come back, I'm going to go backwards and forwards, ask them more questions. Can you refine this? So great prompters, it's planning, prompting, and then fine tune and polish. Most just do the prompt and wonder why they get poor results. Here's an example of a well-crafted prompt. So Monday nights, it's dad cooking evening meal. So our local Chinese gets a lot of orders because my cooking's not good. So here's a prompt for spaghetti, one of our favourites. The context: for vegetarians, so no meat. Limits: please no more than 20 minutes or I'm going to burn the dinner again. And tone: please make it incredibly simple instructions so a numpty Mike can actually have a chance of cooking it without burning it again. Now here's a poor prompt, unless I'm a Michelin star chef and I don't need many directions. But for me, this wouldn't help me cook a decent meal, I'd burn it. However, taking this well-structured prompt, this is what it gives me. Maybe a little hard to see on the screen, but it's given me detailed ingredients, portion control. So my wife and I, son and daughter, in fact, we got 2 dogs, better make that 6 portions. Clear instructions. It's even given me a summary table. Now, I didn't ask for that table, but it probably thought, oh, it's Mike, he's hopeless. Let's put in a table to help him have more chance of cooking tonight's meal. Something that I've spent 40 years in professional services, and risk has been pounded into me from day one. So again, always double check what you're sharing and what you're taking out of these models, because ultimately it's the human that's accountable for the information that's used. I asked ChatGPT what some of the biggest mistakes that beginners make. And it was great to see that vague prompts was number 1, because I nod along with that. Lack of factual verification. Again, I nodded along. Very much the case. You need to double check when it comes back to you. Look for the hallucinations. But then number 3, not iterating, that third step where the real magic happens. And this was not me setting it up to do this. I just asked a simple question, and these were the top 5 that it came up with. As we run up towards the end, I want to share one of my hidden tips. If you're not sure how to craft a prompt, why not ask the machine to help you? Now, you never think, Google search, how should I write my search question? But with these models, you can. In effect, flip it and say, I don't know where to start. It can then ask you a series of questions, a bit like an expert consultant would, and then come up with a prompt, which you can then cut and paste into your chat and then work from there. And for a lot of people, there's ooh, I wouldn't have thought of asking it for assistance. Well, yes, that's why it's called ChatGPT, because you can chat backwards and forwards to the model. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Michael because he's got a couple of use cases that he can just demonstrate. If you want to stay on, I'm happy to do some more live demonstrations and take questions. But for now, Michael, you had a couple of things to share as well. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to do a very basic example of how people might start using AI in the real world. It's not a very advanced example, but one of the things that I've always found is that writing a document or starting a complex document is the hardest bit and takes the longest to prepare for. And one of the really good use cases for AI is to get it to draft this document for you. And actually having this starting point could save me 1 to 3 hours of research, background reading, checking different blogs, or even going straight to a consultant or HR consultant or paying for this document set from somewhere. So the example I have is I work in a UK business. I want to create an acceptable use policy for IT, security and expectations of personal use at work. It's a really common one. If you're doing cyber essentials, if you're doing supplier audits and certifications, they want to know what rules you have in place. There's quite a lot to cover. And you might also have come across people, you pop your head into their office and they're using Facebook and it's 11 o'clock in the morning on Monday and you think, hang on, it's a little bit early, but you've not set any expectations, so you don't actually have anything to have a discussion with them around. So we set it off working it, and as you can see, it's generated a pretty comprehensive and long document, including some sections that I've not asked for, because it's gone away. It's looked across the internet what good practices are, what most people do, and added things like incident reporting. It's covered privacy and data protection. Did you know that there are, because you might not know, there are actually laws around monitoring people at work, even if it's personal use at work. The second bit of this is, once we've seen it work through and it's thinking and reasoning what it's come up with, there's actually a lot there. So if I am receiving a very long document like this, another thing AI is really good at is insert a summary of the most important points on the first page. I want employees to be able to refresh themselves really quickly. And this is another example where I do work across big reports. I'm sure most people are the same. Somehow writing the short bit actually takes longer than writing the long bit. And again, a short starting point is a much more useful place to go. So there we have a quick refresh of key expectations. I think it's almost a bit too long. Make it more concise, change the styling so that it stands out in the document. And now you're starting to see how AI has changed how I work, because obviously I could just take this as a starting point and make those changes myself, but it's so quick and so easy to get it to look at these documents and make these changes that nowadays it's just natural to take that as a starting point. Okie dokie. I also need to do a little bit of the work myself. Formatting's not quite there. I need to do some work with what the brand colors are. The final one, and what's really important, is a useful thing to do, is to challenge the work itself. So does this document fully fit with GDPR, which is actually UK GDPR now, but you'll work out the difference, and employment law. So where you have used it to generate something, you should be checking the work yourself, but another useful prompt is just to get the AI to check its own homework first. So does it fit? Well, it's kind of what we'd expect. We've generated a document very quickly. and it's pretty standard advice. If you want to use the document as a legal document, probably get somebody, a lawyer, to check it over. Think about tightening up these bits and GDPR and the privacy. You need to be a bit more specific here. What's your actual disciplinary, and have you thought about these other devices? So even within a few minutes, I've got myself a starting point where I could be tidying up and mopping this document up over the next half an hour, rather than a whole day's worth of research and editing to get myself to this point. And that's all I wanted to dip in. I think there's a couple more examples that are better fit for the intermediate one later on at lunchtime. Which I hope to see some of you there for. Any closing remarks, Mike?
I was going to say, if any of the three that are on would like to stay and see some live demos, just say yes in the chat. And I will happily do that.
As a yes.
Okay.
And yeah, if there's any questions as well. Anybody but
Cool. So we have 2 people in, and yeah, if there are any specific questions, just drop it in the chat, and we'll address those in a second.
So I was going to show you some of the tools that I use that perhaps I'm not going to look at the main players like ChatGPT and Copilot, because everybody will have those, but just some rather unusual ones. And the first is a tool called Napkin. Now, I'm dyslexic, and being called Michael doesn't help, because A before E is one of the few words. And I much prefer pictures than lots of text. And what Napkin allows you to do is to take a chunk of text, and it will then generate a whole load of visual representations of those, of that text. And it can come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of different styles. Now, this isn't perhaps the quality of image that you put into your corporate accounts or maybe on your website, although actually it's pretty darn good, the quality that it can do. You can actually, within the tool, you can make edits, because you could cut and paste it into PowerPoint or Google Slides, etc. But I just find this great for taking text and making it into a visual representation. And maybe then I then go to my graphic artist experts who then take this and then turn it into a much more slick looking tool, or maybe even cut and paste into some of the image tools and things like ChatGPT and Google that can make it, say, photorealistic. And the other incredible thing, everything I'm showing you today, there is a free version. Now, also be careful of free. I'm going to get so many credits today. Make sure again what you're sharing and what you're taking out of them. But the thing that really astounds me is that never in the history of mankind have had access to this kind of technology for free. Now, nothing is totally for free, because again, look at your data, etc. But the power is now at people's fingertips like we've never had before. Another tool that I use an awful lot is called Ybot. Ybot. You may know the technique of asking the question why 5 times. Well, why do you do that? Well, historically, why not do this way? Now, children do this to annoy their parents. Why, mummy? Why, mummy? Why? And we just keep asking why. You're going to get under the surface of a problem. And what Ybot does is it takes your challenge, your question, and it just allows you to keep asking why, and then why again, and why again. And you can keep on going down as many levels as you want. And often say 3 to 5 levels is a great way of unpicking a particular challenge or a problem. And then what you end up with, you can probably see on here, is a kind of sort of tree diagram with lots of branches. And what I find as I start to read through the various sort of branches, in many cases, it's obvious stuff that I've thought of. But there's always going to be 1 or 2, hadn't thought of that, or in my case, being old, I'd forgotten from 20 years ago, or haven't used SWOT analysis or PESTLE in a long time. And it's just getting a way for the machine to take you on a bit of a journey in a nice, quick way. and in a way that's easy to interpret and to understand. One of my all-time favorite tools is one from Google called Notebook LM. It's one tool of the year for the last couple of years. And in fact, I'm just going to just reshare it a sec because I need to get the sound to work on here as well. And it started its life as a research tool. And you may remember that they used to have brick buildings called libraries back in prehistory, where they had books, and you'd go to a library to perhaps do a history essay, and you'd sit at the table and you would get some books on, I don't know, Winston Churchill, and maybe you got some handwritten notes or maybe some photocopies from your history lecturer. And then you gather all the materials in front of you. Well, the electronic version of this is you, first of all, go and gather all your source information. And that could be websites, it could be PDFs, documents, videos, it could be all sorts of things. You can even actually just copy chunks of text in if you want to. So the first thing is to set up your sort of knowledge bank, knowledge repository. Here's a very important element around Notebook. It's what's called a grounded tool. It will only look at the data that you put into the sources. It won't go and query the internet unless you ask it to. So if I asked it, what was last night's football scores? Because I've not uploaded any information and it's not got access to the BBC Sport page, I will confuse it and come back and say, I'm very sorry, I can't find any football scores. I can find loads of stuff on project management, but I can see that's what's in the source documents. And this helps to reduce hallucinations to not quite zero, but getting that way, because you can control the quality of the data. Now, obviously, if you upload a load of garbage, you'll get garbage out, but assuming you know what's in there. So I'm very sorry, I've got nothing on football. I can tell you lots about Project Office because that's what's in the source documents. You can then start to have a question. So you might ask, what is a PMO? And if it can find an answer based on your information, it will spin up an answer. In the same way, if you're in any of the chat GPTs or Geminis or Copilots, when you're chatting away, it'll give you an answer. But this is only looking at your approved source information. It's not looking at the internet unless you ask it specifically, which usually you don't want to. So it will now come back, and as well as giving me its answer, it'll also show me some citations. Where did it find the information from? So here we go. So this found it in document 5 on this page. So if you wanted to, you can go and check the veracity of the source information. I was looking at 5 tender documents the other day, uploaded them, and then I'll see, can you do me a table comparing and contrasting the 5 vendors against cost, time scales? Imagine the kind of questions I would ask. And then I can go and have a look. So that was page 6 of vendor 1. That was page 8 of vendor 2. I can go and do my sort of due diligence off the back of it. You can also, if you want to, you can actually customize it. One option is to put it into what's called a learning guide style, in which case it takes on like the persona of, say, a school teacher or a coach, and it will give you Socratic style coaching. Now, remember, the best teachers at school, they wouldn't show you the answer, but then help you work your way through to the answer. So you could remember the next time how to solve that problem. And that's what this will do. You can even put a custom instruction. You might say, the goal of what I'm doing here is perhaps to ace my Winston Churchill essay. I might then say, act in the style of a top Harvard history professor. So when it's talking to you, it knows of how to respond. Now, you could just leave it in default, but you can actually get it very highly finely tuned to work in a particular way. And that's great. So that's very much the way a lot of the models work. Where this one starts to take over is in what's called the studio, where you can start to look at all your data in a variety of different ways. One way is you can create a mind map. I'm going to run one in background. You can also spin up PowerPoint style decks directly from the content of your information. And back to Michael's point about saving hours doing your sort of first draft. Now, this gets you perhaps 85% of the way. Now, I actually asked it, could you spin it up and could you do it in the style of Jurassic Park with dinosaurs? And you can see the quality of the imagery is just amazing. Now, it would have taken me hours to come up with this kind of pack because I've got no PowerPoint or no creative skills. But this it did in about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I can then download it and then start to fine tune and play with it. You can also get it to spin up if you want to just standard Word documents, because some people still like text, which is fine. Saying things like briefing docs, blog posts. But being AI, it will look at your source documents, think, ooh, yes, this is about project management, and then make some suggestions relevant to your source documents. So, for instance, an implementation plan, that's great for doing projects. If you don't like any of its suggestions, you can make your own. So I might ask for, say, a frequently asked questions, an FAQ. You can also now create videos, a bit like sort of TikTok, 2-3 minute videos as well. See if I can get this to run. I think I might be struggling a little bit with the internet at the moment. Here's my mind map that it's created. Now, this is quite a linear mind map because for me, mind maps, you ought to be able to link sort of box 1 with box 20. But it's rather like sort of looking at the kind of the table of contents of everything you've got and be able to go in a bit more detail. And what's particularly nice is that it's interactive. So if I clicked on this chain of thought button, it will go look in the source documents and spin me up an answer about chain of thought. So again, if you're very much a visual reasoner or learner, this is a great way of looking at your information in a much more easy to digest way. And that will take a minute or two while it spins up the information. You can now create quizzes and flashcards. I don't know if we've got any examples of those. Here we go, here's some flashcards. Again, not everyone's cup of tea, but for some people, this is a great way to learn. My daughter is sitting down in an hour's time to do her final A-level, which is why it's my very final school run today. And she's been using it as a great way of just testing her knowledge on some key aspects of her final paper. There's even a deep dive button. So I wanted to know, well, why was that the answer? I could click on that and like the interactive mind map, it will spin me up a more detailed answer. And here's an example of a quiz. And it even gives you hints for the quiz. And again, if you wanted to, with a question, you could do a deep dive. And you can see over here that this flashcard is now coming up with a deep dive answer associated with that. The final thing I wanted to show you was you can also, as well as creating videos, and I'm hoping that the technology works here, you can also create audio style podcasts. Now, the question will be as to whether the sound is coming through. Could you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat if you can hear the voices? Because we can't at our side, and I wonder that's because I've got...
Really dismantling this illusion of what we call PMO theater.
Oh, I love that term. Like you look at a standard corporate work breakdown structure, right, a WBF, and it looks like this beautifully orchestrated symphony, hundreds of neat little boxes.
Well, exactly.
What you're hearing there is 2 AI-generated podcasters having a conversation. We like 2 radio compares. And they giggle, they chat, they interact. But the fun part
It creates this perfect illusion of control that just looks flawless on paper, but it completely ignores physical reality.
Oh, hey, I think our listeners got something to say.
I've got a question. What is a PMO?
That is a fantastic question to jump in with.
Yeah, we totally dove into the deep end without checking the pool depth first.
So PMO stands for Project.
You can pause and have a live conversation as though there are two real human beings, like on the end of a phone line, and they will answer any question on anything in your sources. There's a reason why it won Tool of the Year the last couple of years, is ability to, in effect, interact, have a live conversation. And I mention this partly because it's jaw-dropping technology, but also it's probably the direction of travel. Quite why we're still using QWERTY keyboards in 2026. They were designed for mechanical typewriters of 150 years ago. We can actually talk about 4 times quicker than we can type. And it's more natural to talk than it is to try and craft language. I'm dyslexic, I struggle to write words, etc. And I think in a few years' time, we'll be getting rid of the keyboard and we'll just be talking to and interacting with these models. You can put them on your phone. Often when I'm driving, hands-free, have to quickly say, I'll be having a conversation with the AI model, discussing maybe an idea for a new training course. And when I land after my hour's drive, I can then download the transcript of everything we were talking about and then carry on working up maybe a new course or a new cheat sheet that I'm doing at the time. So these is where the models, the last thing I would say is that these models, this is the worst they'll ever be, because in a month's time, in 6 months' time, they'll be that much better and they'll carry on getting better and better. So I'll pause there. If there's any last minute questions, thoughts, insults. Was there a question?
We had the one from Connor, which was how secure are public LLMs like Claude and ChatGPT over Copilot for company data? And I think the answer is, when we're talking about security there, we're worried about confidentiality of the things that you're putting in. And as a general, the general rule that we've been saying ever since those Facebook or Gmail accounts are free, which is if you're not paying for it, whatever you're putting in is probably helping that company generate money in some way from advertising. So if you want to provide simple guidelines to people, you shouldn't be putting company data into free AI. Now, some of the paid ones, you have a bit more control on a case-by-case basis over how that data is used. But there's still some detailed inspection needed to make sure for what you're handling, if it's health or if it's financial, there is not necessarily a guarantee with Anthropic, so Claude at the moment, where's the processing happening? It might be in the US and you need to read into the details. The models have also, or the approach has really gone for advancement over controls. And in Copilot, I've seen it's the other way around. It might not have the greatest features imported yet, but it does have a very clear ring fence from the get-go that whatever you're putting in isn't getting recycled out into someone else's answer. It is safe to put company data in there. It is approved when you have that little green tick that Mike has. And where Copilot takes the edge at the moment is where you are using 365, some of the things like sensitivity labels or data loss prevention, that more advanced features, they already work with its version of AI. It's kind of built a lot more with this data governance and this confidentiality in mind. So yeah, it's not a no, it's just to consider what you're doing and what you want to use it for, because sometimes you do need to use the right AI for the job, in which case you want to make sure you're paying, you want to make sure the terms and conditions, you want to know where the data is going, and you want to make sure that it's backed up in your own policies and documentation and contracts out to clients, that you will be handling it in that way. So I hope that helps as a very high summary. Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, great to see everybody. Charlotte, next time I'm driving to the airport, I shall think of you as I drive past True Magnet. Connor, Richard, great to see you. And if you'd like to join us at, what is it, 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock,
1
yes, in just over an hour's time.
We're going to be doing sort of an intermediate, looking at some of the newer features like canvas mode, deep research, shots, what I call examples, which will build upon what I covered this morning. You're very welcome to join us for that as well. I'll also do a bonus feature of those who can say at the end and talk a bit about AI agents. Now, I could do a whole 2.5 hours just on that, but I'll do a little brief that of a bit like going in and having a little taster at a wine festival. So if you want to stay for that, again, you're very welcome. But for now, enjoy your lunch when it comes round.